Hi, my wonderful friends. It's David Ault. Welcome to the gathering. I know that you juggle a lot of fear. You can't help it. I can't help it because we are a part of something called being human. And this thing being human is filled with paradox. It's filled with yin yang, if you will. It's you could call it the rules of the game. And so we're in the game and we're going to play the game, but the whole point of the game is to recognize that it's a game. It's not to dismiss it and say, I'm not going to play anymore and then isolate. It's that, no, you're here. You're human. I'm human. We're in the game together. So to master this, what we do is we don't let the fears then of separation and loss and harm or disappointment or any of the things that are encapsulated in the things that bring us fear, we don't let them create stagnation or inertia in us. We don't then, as we're going through the game, begin to invest a lot of time and energy in building walls to protect ourselves from it. We face it no matter what the fear is, no matter how real and how overwhelming the fear is, we turn to it and we can, let's say, systematically begin to chip away through the facade. Kind of like in The Wizard of Oz, when they see that there is this facade behind the curtain. The all powerful Oz isn't all powerful at all, it's an illusion. And you are not failing in this. You are where you are based upon exploration, information, and environment that has helped you or not with the understanding of the fear. And so let's say the whole intention of this communication right now is to understand that fear just a little bit more so that you don't continue in the cycle of it, the ups and the downs, the trying to navigate to prevent it or medicate from it or escape it, but to continue to look at it for what it is and allow that which is an internal knowing that appears to be courage and bravery, but really what it is a a reconciliation of the wisdom that always knew that the fear has no power over you other than the power that you give it, other than the power that we continue to relinquish to this paradox. And so what we continue to do is help one another remember that, right? So there was a quote that I saw that's attributed to multiple sources, but I really loved it because it said, never let a crisis go to waste. Never let a crisis go to waste. Never let a good crisis go to waste, because what does a crisis ultimately do? There are terms like crisis of faith, crisis of hope. And in those moments, you could even say, and it feels weird to put it like this, but there's a little bit of a surrender, a beautiful surrender, a sweet surrender where we metaphorically, perhaps even physically, fall to our knees in that crisis, because all of the things, the tactics, the maneuvers, the past blueprint and customs that we have used in order to build those walls against the fear no longer work. We hit a sort of wall, and in hitting that wall, that crisis, it allows us to just let all of that maneuvering go. And what we do is we instantly soften in that moment. We surrender. And the surrender sometimes is, you might have to take a little bit of time to just be. to not go into any kind of action, to not try to force anything, but just to sit with all of the feelings, to sit with the fear, to sit with the disappointment, to look at the avalanche of thought that is trying to pull you to do something or to protect yourself. And in that crisis moment of surrender, if we can just not rush to try to do old ways or old tactics, but to soften and to be, some beautiful things can emerge. It's like a beautiful fallow season, if you will. If you know anything about agriculture and really good, wise farming techniques, a good farmer will tell you that the field has to have a fallow season. In other words, you don't just keep planting things over and over and over again to get as much as you can, but you understand the nature of the soil. And in understanding the nature of the soil, there are times when the soil has to regenerate. It has to remineralize. It has to pause. And in that pausing, it has to give itself time in order to reunite with the fertilization that has never left it, but just needed some breathing room. And so a good crisis can do that. It can cause you to go into what appears to be a fallow season, which can be scary, particularly if you've based your life on doing. It's like, pause. Have a little bit of a fallow season. I've had fallow seasons before. I've even had a fallow year before. And when I look back in hindsight, I look at the beauty and the wisdom of that time. And so if your fear right now is a product of, we'll call it a crisis, let's not let the crisis go to waste. Let us see the wisdom in it and take a pause. There is a beautiful story of a Tibetan female monk. She lived in the 11th century, and I really want you to do your research and investigate her, because I think that you will be inspired by her. I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation of her name, but it's Machig Labdrön. Machig Labdrön. I will put the name spelled in the description so that you can look it up. You can even find people that talk about her on YouTube who are into Tibetan Buddhism. Even Pema Chodron talks about her. And Machig Labdrön in the 11th century was a woman very much in crisis, just like you and I. And she went to her teacher and she said, I want to wake up. Can you identify with that? Is there a part of you that kind of at times even feels like it's screaming, saying, I want to wake up. I want to wake up from trying to hide from the crises, from trying to speed things up in order to prevent the crises, when the crises are a part of the cycle of being human. I want to wake up from trying to outrun my fear. And so there's stories about her and her adventures into becoming this beautiful yogini in the 11th century. And one of the pieces that you will find about her is something called the Five Slogans. And it has to do with personal crisis and what her teacher told her in the 11th century, which is still very valid and very true for you today. And the first one is, confess your hidden faults. When you think about confession, confessing your hidden faults, when you think about even the systems that are in place today for you to do that, or programs that are in place today for you to do that, you cannot help but not think of something like a recovery program, where one goes and part of one of the steps is to talk about all of those things that have been repressed inside of you. And everyone needs a really good, safe space for confession. You do have to hand it a little bit to Catholicism for having that model, but understand that confessing your hidden faults is airing those things out that keep attributing to the cycle of fear. Meaning, there are so many stories, so many concepts and pictures within our mind of how we think things will be perceived, how we look at our past mistakes and mishaps, how we look at our addictive behaviors, how we look at all of the things that we have judgment on, and how we bury those things. And when we bury those things, when you bury something like that in the soil, eventually it's going to keep growing. It's going to keep sprouting. It's going to keep doing all the things. And then what are we doing? We're trying to spray it with a weed killer. We're trying to do all this to keep people from seeing it. If you pause that, and you use your wisdom that is in there to find those places where you can give it air, give it rest, and to confess your faults. So part of these 5 slogans, number 1, is confess your hidden faults, the things that scare you, the things that you think if another person knew, your world will end. And perhaps there are personalities where when they do know it, the world as you know it will. But understand that is too a part of the wisdom of the cycle in order to never let a crisis go to waste. Second is to approach what you find repulsive. I think oftentimes we immediately go to personality. I know in America, where I reside, there is one side of the fence that is repulsed by political parties. And every time we look at it, that repulsion starts to grow. And the repulsion, as it grows, produces a tsunami of fear about self-preservation, about personal rights, about personal freedoms. And again, very real in this particular narrative, in this particular plane of form, in this particular body as we know it. But if you approach what it is that you find repulsive, be it ideology, be it personality, be it anything that is foreign to you that you are afraid of. And to approach it means to turn to it and to not engage with it without wisdom, but turn to it to listen, to understand. And how do you do that? By understanding that it too is operating from a system of fear. That's it. It doesn't mean turn to it in order to find agreement with it, but turn to it in order to keep giving it power in the way in which you do your busyness in order to battle it. Stop battling it and turn to it. Seek first to understand. Again, doesn't mean agreement. And when you begin to find that thing that we will call courage or bravery, but really it's the unearthing of wisdom again, then the crisis that has brought and fed and sparked the repulsion can finally also have the chance to breathe. Number 3 in the 5 slogans is help those you think you cannot help. Not help those you think you can help. Help those you think you cannot help. And helping then is a slippery slope because it isn't so much an act of doing as it is an act of perceiving. The first example that comes to me is in my many decades of being a minister of a philosophy that was based upon mind, body, spirit connection, the power of thought. I'll give you an example of a mother coming to me, and she would say to me, I want you to pray for my daughter. She is partnered with someone who is dangerous, who is a lowlife, who is an opportunist. And I want you to pray that she comes to her senses and she sees the light of day and leaves him. And variations on a theme. So a third party is coming to me, asking me to pray that another party or person changes their way. So that is not the form of prayer that we participate in. I never pray for another person if there is no permission given, because it's overlaying my perceptions of how I think things should be. But if you come to me and you say, I'm having trouble in the way in which I see my daughter, then we have something here. And what I often would have to do is very gingerly and very kindly find a way to communicate that and look at the mother and say, let's try an experiment, shall we? Instead of me doing what you just requested, what if we try this? What if every time you think of your daughter, you do a form of prayer or a form of visualization where you channel all of your imaginative energy and you see her in joy. You see her fulfilled. You see her thriving. And if you can hold that visualization for, let's say, 2 minutes, 120 seconds, every time there is the impetus to look and want to judge her or see her as damaged, I want you to reverse it in the moment that that impulse comes to see her that way and change it and use your creativity in a way that is untapped, to see her thriving, to see her happy, to see perhaps an expression on her face change to someone who is in deep peace. That is a way to help those you think you cannot help. So we all have people who are struggling with addictions. We all have, quote, quote, family members, particularly around holiday time. This is Thanksgiving month here in America, where so much wounds get reopened and picked at and, recharged because of the friction of familial dynamics. And instead of continuing the same cycle of conversation about ain't it awful or finding people, because you will always find people to agree with you about how you feel with regards to someone or something, you always will. Instead of using your energy that way, go inward, go into the fallow part that wants to rest, that wants to stop building up a case. Go inward in that way and begin to see the people that you have antagonism towards being at peace. Number 4, anything you are attached to, give that away. We're not just talking about materialism. If you're attached to trying to protect yourself, I want you to begin to understand that, or consider, that there's nothing outside of you that can protect you from the crisis. There's nothing outside of you that can protect you from all of the things that are a part of duality. And so to give those protections away means that you begin to understand the dance between individuality and harmony. Individuality and harmony. You understand to live in the paradox that says, I trust in Allah and I tie up my camel. Anything that you are attached to, you think is going to protect you from never having to experience disappointment or crisis again. I want you to give that up, give it away, release it. That's one way to look at that slogan. The other way, anything you're attached to, give it away. Give that away. If you are attached to something material, if you are attached to hoarding something, saving something for a rainy day, let's just say it's money, and you're holding on to it because you are afraid that you won't have enough, then begin to experiment by giving some of that away. Use your wisdom. You don't have to abide by any kind of particular way or amount, but start to experiment by sharing something that you have with other people if you're afraid to share. Even this can be an invitation to play with words and slogans and phrases that you have built your life upon. I remember oftentimes in the church world, many people would come to me and they would say, I'm on a limited income. I'm on a fixed income. And I go, I understand. I know. I understand how careful one must have to navigate the world on a fixed income. But I said, what if we try to experiment and instead of using the phrase fixed income, we say guaranteed minimum? I'm living right now on a guaranteed minimum. Look at the psychology and the shift of that and how that takes the concepts of finiteness and opens it up to infiniteness. And again, some people might tell you that in order to manipulate you to get something out of you. I'm not trying to manipulate you or get you to do something that doesn't feel wise. But I'm just drawing attention to the fact that anything that you are attached to with regards to an identity or a label or a protective device, give that away. Give that away literally, or give that away to the wisdom and the solution that already exists. And say, give it to a higher power, if you will. And lastly, go to the places that scare you. Machig Labdrön said, go to the places that scare you. You know what those places are. You know the places that are vulnerable. You know the conversations. Go to the conversations that scare you. Go to the physical places that scare you. Go to the vulnerable places of revealing yourself that scare you. Confess your hidden faults. Approach what you find repulsive. Help those you think you cannot help. Anything you are attached to, give that away. Go to the places that scare you. Never let a crisis go to waste. Let us cease trying to build lives that prevent the crisis and just accept the fact that in this dualistic realm of existence, this thing called being human, they will come and go. But that which is peace, that which is knowing, that which is a principle that says the only reality is intelligence, divine order, then doesn't become something that is just applicable when things are going well, but become even more true and more real in those times of crisis. I walk this path with you, and I love you.